Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for being here today. My name is Ayodele, and I serve as a wealth strategist at Northern Trust. And I also serve on the Global Africa Council for the Smithsonian's National Museum for African Art. Thank you for joining us for the 2025 edition of Expo Chicago, the International Exposition of Contemporary and Modern Art. And Northern Trust is honored to have you here today as we represented as the presenting sponsor for Expo. On behalf of my colleagues, I'm delighted to welcome you to this afternoon's exchange stage discussion, Collecting Forward, Delivering Cultural Capital, presented in collaboration with the Black Trustee Alliance for Art Museums. Today, I'm pleased to introduce our esteemed panelist duo, Commissioner Clinée Hedspeth, the Commissioner of the City of Chicago's Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events, and Mr. Eric McKissack, the Collector Extraordinaire, Trustee of the Art Institute of Chicago, board member of the Terra Foundation, the Arts Club of Chicago, and the Graham Foundation. Together, Commissioner Hedspeth and Mr. McKissack will explore how intentional collecting practices and sustained support for artists contribute to the creation of lasting cultural capital, deepening personal engagement with the arts, while strengthening the social and creative fabric of communities across Chicago. Drawing from her decades leadership, Commissioner Hedspeth will speak to the city's efforts and expand equitable access to arts and culture. Mr. McKissack, whose philanthropic and institutional commitments have championed Black artists and collectors, will reflect on how private stewardship can drive public impact. Thank you, and please welcome to the stage Commissioner Clinée Hedspeth and Mr. Eric McKissack.
Well, hello everyone, and Eric.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see people to arrive on a sunny day in Chicago, and there's so many things to look, beautiful things to look at on the floor. So thank you for coming and taking a listen to what we have to talk about.
Yeah, absolutely. So Eric.
Yes.
I had the honor of seeing your collection some time ago. Eclectic, beautiful. So many other things. Can you kind of open up to everyone your journey, and also to ground us in some working language? What do you see as who is a collector, and how do you define that?
Well, those are great questions. So I'm happy to talk about my journey as an art enthusiast. So I actually don't, although I have accumulated objects, or we have accumulated objects over the years, I don't really think of my primary engagement as a collector. As you've heard, I'm involved in boards and have been fortunate enough to develop friendships with artists. And so that's created a hobby life for me that allows the other side of my brain to get rewarded versus my career interests as an investment professional, 40 years in the investment world. And so it's always great to have this as an option, a visual stimulation, as well as a way to have a hobby that encompass so many things that I enjoy. But anyway, the way I got started collecting is, I think the seed was planted from being a child. Grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and the HBCU, Historically Black College, Fisk University, is there. So the head of the museum at the time, who later went on to Maryland, was David Driscoll, the esteemed scholar and painter, and he was a friend of our family. So I knew David as just someone around, and so that planted a seed. Then I spent summers at the museum there, the Carl Van Vechten Gallery at that time, and got to know the collection, and just filed that away. You know, that was childhood experience. And then when I got to be a teenager, I wasn't interested in going to a museum, but that was something I did as a younger person. So then I fast forward to Chicago, and I moved here and got involved at grassroots level with different groups, and started going to art fairs like the Southside Community Art Auction and buying things, and very small things. Didn't know what I was buying, just saw something I liked and I'd buy it. Around the year 2000, not because of my art collecting, but because of my investment expertise, I was asked to join the Art Institute board, the board of the Art Institute of Chicago. And more than anything, that opened up my eyes to a bigger view of collecting, but also what I felt was insufficient attention to diverse artists and work by diverse artists. And while they had some things, they were kind of in the back room of storage. Every now and then they'd have a show, and then 2 years later they'd have a show. So it wasn't this integrated effort to incorporate works by diverse artists in the canon in a way that I thought they were merited. So, so that became kind of an interest, and it's been embraced by many others over the years, but that was an interest for me about 20, 25 years ago.
What do you see? Are we going to have we had some slides of your, no?
I don't know.
Did you scrap that? Did you scrap that?
I didn't scratch it.
Okay. All right.
But maybe it didn't.
It didn't make it up there.
Maybe it didn't make it here. I don't know.
Okay. Do you only interact with or purchase pieces by living artists that you know, that you have some kind of connection with? And do you see that as an investment? So we're going to get right into that.
Okay, yes. So I think that I've generally invested in living artists, and initially when I started collecting, I mentioned the Southside Community Art Auction, I would talk to the artist. You know, they would be selling their works, or they'd give the works and they'd be at the auction. And so that was part of the reward of collecting, was getting to know the artists. And over the years, Chicago has been a crucible of so many great artists, especially in recent years, that have gone on to get national and international acclaim. And so that was a reward for me to get that interest. But I also have bought some work by deceased artists because the work was so captivating, or it had a dialogue with artists that I already collected.
Yeah. And do you see that as an investment, though?
Yes, I was trying to avoid
Under
that question.
your portfolio, right?
Well, here's what I would say about it. It is an investment, and I could talk about that more extensively. That is that art is a diversifying asset class. It's not highly correlated with other categories like stocks and bonds, although there is some correlation. A bad economy is bad for everyone. But when I first started, I didn't think of it that way. And then over the years, some of the artists that I got to know in Chicago, and Kerry James Marshall hates it when I give this example, but I met him in 1990, and I begged him for a painting for years. He was always making a work for some show, for his Jack Shaman, his gallerist, and I was always at the back of the list. So finally, about 6 years later, I didn't get a painting directly from Kerry. I got it from his gallery. His gallery said, "Oh, this painting has come up on the secondary market." And so I said, "Okay, I like it. I'll take it." So then, of course, you know, that was before many great things have happened deservedly for him. And the show has been places, the painting has been places that I haven't been, which is part of what's great about collecting as well, that if you have a collection that has some resonance with museums or scholars or others, that it will travel. And so this painting went to the Metropolitan Museum and was on the cover of their publication for the museum. I was like, wow, it looks really good there. So that has become an example of something that I bought because I liked it and because I had a relationship with the artist, but it also became a valuable work over time, much more than I could have imagined. It's multiples of what the purchase price was.
Yeah. So sitting on a lot of these boards, particularly ones that are museums and foundations, do you keep that very separate from your collecting practice, or engaging in the sense of, you know, when you're on these boards, you're supposed to be, you know, looking through a different lens than when you're going to live with a piece?
Well,
or are they in conversation?
They are in conversation. You're obviously in most museums, especially the big ones, they don't want you to be in conflict with what they're doing. You know, you're not supposed to front run them, or it's almost like an investment world story. But you learn from them. You know, you learn from what they're buying. You learn from what they're looking at. That's part of the reward of being affiliated with institutions, that you're able to have dialogue with great curators and other collectors, and that allows you to inform what you want to do. And so the other thing too is that even though we've had more of a focused collection in terms of artists of color mostly, you see lots of work. You see, in museums, and you see lots of things, and that also helps your scholarship and your understanding of what's going on in the art market. And so it's helpful and expansive to do that.
Yeah. With a lot of the things that are going on federally, where does that place you? You're in both spaces in the sense of you're the art world, the art market, and then you're an investor. So you're kind of hovering through a lot of the ecosystem. And so how do you want to utilize your collection, number one, to maybe make some change, or, what do you want to do with that? And then also with some of the boards that you're on.
Well, I feel fortunate to be affiliated with institutions that I think are trying to find ways to maintain their missions and their goals despite what seems to be a chilling effect coming from Washington. And I feel very strongly that there seems to be an interest in terms of culture coming from Washington now about making everything into a melting pot of just one flavor. That we're not going to have. Our culture is really more like gumbo. You want to be able to taste the crab, and you want to be able to taste the chicken, you want to be able to taste the sausage. And that's part of what's rich about this society. And the idea that there's going to be some sort of bland porridge and it's going to be all the same, and you're going to try to wipe out even negativity, that's part of history, that's part of life. So, and that some people should have their eyes shielded from seeing certain things because they can't handle it. Well, that's part of growing and learning. And so I feel very strongly that what's happened in the last few years to open up collectors, museums, institutions to broader conversations that are inclusive should go on regardless of what happens and we have to find ways to support institutions that are not as strong as they used to be, and I know that some of the foundations I have connection with are very interested in that as well.
Good, thank you. How do you define cultural capital?
Yeah, that's a mashup of terms. Culture is a form of capital, clearly, and I guess at times it could be monetized, but it's also it's not a term that I use regularly, but I think of it, if I were to try to infer what it means, it's a way of using culture to influence society and influence activity and thinking. And it reminds me of a quote that I came up with, and I had seen it before, but from James Baldwin, who says, "The purpose of art is to lay bare the questions that have been hidden by the answers." And if ever we need that, now this is a time. So I think that's cultural capital. It allows us to really make sure that we're using the culture to influence society and also our collective recollection of this time that we're in and times that we have been in. And they form a historical record of what society thought about itself. And that's not just one point of view, one voice. It's many, many voices. And so I think that's what cultural capital means to me.
Yeah. I know that you do a lot of mentorship, and it is even around just supporting artists, and it crosses all parts of your life. Can you tell us a little bit about that and why that's so important and part of your quote-unquote collecting practice?
Yes, I'm happy to. So when I went on the board of the Art Institute, I was one of a very small number of Black trustees, and generationally, I was probably the youngest of the handful of Black trustees that were on there. There was next generation people like John Johnson and the like, and so I was a young person coming along. As a result of that, I was able to encourage others to think about collecting, think about affiliations with museum boards, other civic organizations. Actually, I neglected to mention that I was on the Renaissance Society of the University of Chicago board before the Art Institute. I was on that in the mid-90s. So that was really my first board in the art world. And before that, I was on something, an ambassador type group to the community that was part of the Art Institute that was funded by the Wallace Foundation. There may be some people in this room that were in that group. It was an attempt in the early 90s to think about engaging communities in Chicago that historically did not go to the museums. So all of those things led me to be a little bit more interested in this area than a lot of my friends or peers and people that were younger. And so that led me to encourage them to look at this. And then the LAC came out of that ambassador group that I mentioned, that was, which is the Leadership Advisory Committee at the Art Institute. And it was formed as a group at that time in the mid-90s to engage Black community leaders to be engaged with the museum at a time when there were so few trustees and other ways to get into the door, or at least they weren't apparent. And so all of those things, to answer the question, have led me to, I guess, a mentor role. But the mentoring role has also come as being friends to artists. They think I'm their pro bono financial advisor at times, which I'm happy to do. Many of them are so much better off than I am now. I tell this other story of another Chicago-born collector, artist, I should say, who I used to buy dinner for, or meals. He said when we'd go out to eat, he hoped I would pay for the food. It's Rashid Johnson. Now I'm trying to get Rashid to take me out. And just to give me a little corner of one of those anxious man paintings. So that was part of mentoring as well, getting to know young artists and then to take tremendous pride in seeing what they've accomplished since then. And he has the plug for the show that's at the Guggenheim Museum just opened up, and it will be at the MCA Chicago. So we'll get our chance to see it again. He had a show, sort of an early career retrospective at the MCA, and now he's coming back, so that's going to be great.
Yeah. We're going to switch to the idea of Black art. What is it for you? Yeah.
That's, what is Black art?
Yeah.
So, and artists are even grappling with that question. Some artists don't, who are ethnically categorized as Black, don't want their art to be known as Black art. And so I think the definition is fluid. Black art could be something, the subject matter. It could be the race or categorization of the artist. It could even be the material on the canvas. And Black art is not just African American, it's diasporic. It's all over the world. And we have, by history, we have very unusual definitions of Blackness in the US that are a product of slavery, but around the world it's very different. And so, but I think that Black art and other historically underrepresented artists often see things through different lenses because of their life and cultural experiences. And that's what enables the art to sometimes have a luster and a richness and a narrative that brings something to the art world that people had overlooked for many years. And that's been part of the excitement over the last 10, 15 years, I'll say, in this space. It's been represented by investment activity as well.
Yes. Leads me to ask, do you see some of the works that you have in your collection really challenging the art canon? I'm thinking of particularly pieces like your large Mayhew. I'm not giving away any of your secrets, but it's a
But
big,
there's no images,
I know,
so that's good.
big anchoring piece like that, which demonstrates like abstraction and stuff like that. Is nothing new. We've been creating that, and it wasn't in conversation, or it was just an artist creating beautiful art.
Yeah, well, I don't think they're not revolutionary moves, but they're evolutionary engagement for collectors, curators, and others to see that there was a Black artist who just passed at age 101, I think he was, a few months ago, making these beautiful landscapes, atmospheric landscapes, for years, and was totally ignored. You know, there are obviously lots of painters out there that have painted variations on landscapes. It's been an inspiration for centuries. But it is interesting to see him in conversation with other artists who've worked in that space and with that subject matter. And in that sense, it's evolutionary and part of the canon.
Yeah, yeah. I know your collection. I wish we had those images too. You worked so hard on that.
I sent them.
You did.
I don't know what happened.
You did. I was trying to look. Okay.
Oh.
All of them.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
A few things.
A few things. Question, investment, going back to the investment part. Do you prefer to buy from the artist directly, go through an advisor, go through the gallery? And why do you make the choice to do either or, if you can buy directly from the artist?
Well, I think any or all of those are part of the way people collect. Usually, I should say, often early stage artists don't have representation. And if you develop a relationship with an artist, you may be able to be part of their support group as they develop their practice. And art advisors are certainly helpful to assemble a very cohesive collection, and that's another way to go, and they play an important role in the marketplace. I really haven't used art advisors very much. It probably would have helped if I had, because I've had much more of a kind of organic, kind of like emotional, relationship-driven process to accumulate what we've accumulated in the context of, as I said, relationships and serving in organizations.
And stewardship. You speak a lot about stewardship.
Yes.
So.
Yeah, stewardship is important. I mean, I do feel like, and this is not an original idea, that we are, we don't own these works. We're just caretakers. Mm-hmm. And so we're caretaking for them to go on to some other place. They may go on to your family, but they may go on to institutions. And actually, that is one of the ways that collectors can be impactful, is by donating work to museums. There have been some great collectors and friends like Pamela Joyner, who's spoken at this organization in this event in the past, who've been very impactful by giving work to institutions that didn't have some diverse artists and really impacting what they're able to show in that space. So, okay.
Your SAR piece.
Yeah, this is a Betty Saar assemblage piece. This is the closed hands, and I think we're going to probably see if it's on. You'll see the interior shortly. Okay, yeah, so Robert Colescott. Yeah, so his spelling, I like, taste like chickens.
Yes.
Is the name of that work.
And why did you purchase that one? Other than...
It's provocative.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
And I've been intrigued by Colescott's humor and counterculture attitude to painting. So this is a work by Amanda Williams, Chicago's genius, Amanda Williams. And this one is called What Black Is This You Say? This is one of her series. And this one is, What Do You Mean Tina Marie Ain't Black? She's known for her catchy titles. And another, Chicago is going to be represented here, as you can see. This is one of our beloved Ayodeji's works from the Birmingham series, which is his own story in itself, but I won't tell it. Many of you may be already familiar with it. This is a work by Chakaya Booker. And this one grabbed me because of the materiality. You may not be able to tell, but those are tires. She's worked it to almost look like fabric or material, but it explodes out of a box, almost like it's something to see it more powerful perhaps in person, but it's an interesting work. And this work has a story. My wife was not taken with this piece when I brought it home. So it kind of, and so I told her, and it was true. I said, well, we're going to live with it and see how we feel about it. Yeah. So it sat on the floor in the corner. She said, do we own that yet? She would say. And I said, no, we're still considering. And then it went up on the wall, and she said, we own that, don't we? I said, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And now she likes it. You know, it's funny, you get familiar with things, you get comfortable with things, and it becomes part of your daily life.
Yeah. And you curate within your own home, don't you?
I do move around. Mm-hmm. So this is Carlos Rolón design, as he's known, another Chicago artist. And unfortunately, you don't get a sense of scale, but this painting is humongous. I don't know how we even got it in the door of a standard house. We had to, in fact, it was a fight. We didn't take it off the stretcher, but it was challenging. And it hangs in a stairwell. It's about 7 feet tall, I think. Mm-hmm. So, but there's a skylight overhead, so it glitters during the day. Because it's gold leaf, the back part is gold leaf, so it kind of reflects in the space.
Is that it?
Oh yeah, I guess that's it.
That's
okay,
it.
that was a little sample.
When we're talking about, and we're going back to investment, we're in the Northern Trust Lounge. We have to kind of take it back there. Investing in artists directly. What do you say to people that want to get into investing? Do you tell them art is something they should look at, given the market goes up and down? We're talking about the art market, not the actual art like world and connoisseurship.
Yeah, I think that, as I said earlier, that art is a luxury, not a necessity. You can't eat it when when the paycheck doesn't come home. But for people who are building a diversified portfolio, I think art is a worthwhile and useful, non-correlated way to asset allocate your portfolio. And over time, if one is serious about it and thoughtful about it, and that may be through working with the gallery, it may be working through an advisor, it may be developing your own connoisseurship and becoming so enthusiastic about it, you know what's happening in the market and you have that sense of it. And so I do think that I advise people to think of it as something that they could do, but some people collect cars, some people collect other things. It should come from a place of interest. It's something you can live with and enjoy every day. And the reward may be that it may appreciate in value. It may not. There are many things that I bought that you'd say, if I named the artist, you'd go, who's that? So everything is not going to be some rocket ship to financial wealth. But on the other hand, it is a worthwhile part of a portfolio as well as a life-enhancing activity.
Yeah. You've had challenges, right, with collecting at different points, I'm sure. Maybe some artists, maybe a piece being damaged. I know we've talked about some of that stuff, but
Yeah.
can you tell us a little bit about your experience? And then also, what are some of the challenges you foresee happening?
Well, one of the obvious challenges in having an asset that's on your wall, and if you entertain, and if you, things happen in your home, if you have kids and they don't appreciate that this is of something valuable or important, or grandkids, and also there's insurance requirements, and there's also storage considerations. If you become such a collector that you can't even get everything on the wall, and yet you still want to accumulate work, and so some people I know buy more houses so they can have places to put their art. But that's obviously a certain echelon that does that. So there are challenges around keeping the work, the condition of the work, keeping it in good form, because that's another thing. You've got light, you've got environment. It's not, you don't have necessarily a vault that a museum would have to make you're not rotating things in a way that, oh, this should only be in the sunlight or in light, 6 weeks at a time. Museums have that kind of connoisseurship and maintenance of their works. So these are some of the challenges, and I can't say that I've been perfect at all of those. I'm sure that one day someone's gonna say, what happened to this? I think if we have a small second home, residence in Florida, and it's in a condo, sun every day. It's like bright, bright, bright. And I'm always trying to manage it, and I know that that's probably not good for some of the work that are in adjacent spaces. There's not one sitting by the window in the sun, but on the other hand, there's a lot of reflected light that could be a problem. But that's, it's part of the journey.
Mm-hmm. You going back to mentorship and meshing it with, investing in people also, artists. What would you say, particularly with some of the emerging artists, what's some kind of advice you give them on investing in themselves, and then also thinking career-wise, what that looks like for them?
Yeah, really good question. So, and one of the things that I think has really changed the art world is social media. It's changed not only access to images, but it's also changed how some artists think about themselves and what their expectations are. We've seen that influencer model out there with social media, and in some ways, there's some downside to having instant exposure, because the notion of developing your craft and spending time to figure out what your practice is going to be, and there's some artists who now have an expectation that they're going to come out of school and instantly charge $50,000 for their first work, or something very high. That may be a bit of an exaggeration, but it's not unheard of. There are artists, they come out of Yale MFA and they're getting top dollar for their works. So it's a blessing and a curse in some ways, because great that they're not struggling to try to pay their rent for those few artists that get embraced early on, but they're also, you have no idea what they're going to be making in 5, 10, or 15 years, or they're going to be locked in this space of making the same thing over and over and over because they're responding to the commercial market. And that's not ideally the way to build a career in anything. You've got to grow and develop and learn more. So one of the things I heard, I think it was Helen Goldenberg, who's a big collector in town and well known, she said our career should simmer, not boil. And so you want to keep the heat low, you want to keep it cooking, but you don't want it to, because we've seen what happens when when artists become too popular, and it can be devastating for them to try to have a comeback. And we've seen, there are also artists who have been part of this trading model, and they get their work flipped, and then it becomes, the prices get ahead of the demand, and then if there is supply and demand considerations in the art world, along with the economic environment. Those three can collide sometimes, and that can lead to unfavorable outcomes. So I try to talk to artists, and many others who do as well, some of the young artists that I've met, to think about their career on a long arc and not be so short-term focused.
Yeah. I'm gonna put a little plug in there for Northern Trust. How have you worked with Northern Trust to
Hey, I was like, great.
right, to participate in even the work that they do within supporting culture and art?
Well, I've been affiliated with Northern Trust for 30 years in one form or another, in multiple roles. At one point, I was a sub-advisor, so I worked for Northern Trust as an investment manager. I have participated in some of their entrepreneur programs in past years. And then for the last 15 years, I've been on one of their fund boards. I chair their ETF fund board, which is known as Flex Shares. So I have multiple affiliations with Northern Trust, and they've been rewarding. And one of the things that's been really exciting to me is to see how they have engaged and recognized that being a supporter of the arts is a win-win for everyone. It's not an accident that many of upper echelon collectors would also be prospective clients, but it also enriches Chicago by supporting an institution like Expo Chicago. They're providing cultural capital that helps sustain our city.
Yeah. When you were talking about early on about HBCUs, and some HBCUs have started, and it's not new, but the model of owning shares of a piece. What are your thoughts about that? What are the pros, and what do you foresee are some of the cons, and do they damage ultimately these HBCUs that have limited resources already?
Yes, and I'm very familiar with the controversial one in Nashville. I don't know if you know this story, but so I mentioned earlier on the Carl Van Vechten Gallery, which owned a very famous, Fisk owned a very famous painting, the Radiator Building, which was in the show, the George O'Keeffe show that was at the Art Institute a couple of years ago. And it got to the point where the painting was half of the endowment, of the value of it was half the endowment of the university. So so many of the HBCUs have done amazing work on shoestring endowments. And the school was almost in danger of closing. I don't know how close they were, but this was this big asset that they had to figure out how to monetize, or they decided this was the way to monetize it. So what they did was they sold a half interest to Crystal Bridges, which is Arkansas Museum, started by one of the Walton heiresses, and that was highly controversial. It was litigated in the state. I think it went to the Supreme Court. But on the other hand, and I have mixed feelings about it, of course. I mean, you have this treasure that was part of the cultural capital of the school, but on the other hand, the purpose of the school is to deliver education to its community, to the black students who want to go there and others. And so, it's like, do you feed your kids, or do you put gas in the car? Or, it's like one of these things. There's no easy right answer. But I do think that what is happening that's positive is that some of the schools that have great collections are figuring out ways to, at least some level, try to monetize the collection without necessarily outright sale.
Yeah, absolutely. With that, though, do you think that doesn't really solve the problem, though, right? So Crystal Bridges gets it for 6 months, and HBCU gets it for 6 months. Is it filling in any gap, financial gap, really? I mean, it's
Well, it allowed them to monetize an asset and shore up their endowment. So it did serve a purpose that is sustaining for the university. But it doesn't solve the problem of these institutions of being severely underfunded, and a handful of them have been able to get great gifts and endowments and strengthen their endowment. Right now, in the context of what I mentioned earlier, the one that's probably most worrisome is Howard University, which is a flagship HBCU, which gets a significant share of its budget from the federal government. That was the model from which it was set up, being in Washington, D.C. post-Civil War. It also happens that, as you may know, that Kamala Harris is an alumna of Howard. That is not a good setup in the current environment. And so many of us are worried about what might come forth with that. But it's going to mean there are going to be more of us, and it's not just alumni or corporations and foundations, but it's going to take a village to make sure that these institutions are sustained through what could be an adverse environment.
Yeah. Leads me to ask your ideas on municipalities and what role they play.
Yes, well, that's the question I was going to ask you. You've been asking a lot of great questions. I should be asking you a few questions. So I actually, to that point, I think heading DCASE here, what is the role of, from your perspective, of the city in the art and cultural capital of the community?
I think to get more funding. The city is in a very tough situation. A lot of cities are. This is ongoing. But I think there's a reason why, especially after COVID with ARPA funds, that the city of Chicago and its administration has decided to make sure we budget enough to give another $1 million. And I'm happy to announce that it's actually 1.5 now. So that's a good thing. Directly to artists and small arts organizations, but that direct to artists is so important. A lot of times when you look at a budget and you see X amount of dollars actually going to operations and not actually to programs, or more funding going to data. Well, we've collected a lot of data, right? We know who's going into institutions, who's not going, who has access. And so always making sure that there's funding and more funding and more funding. It's never been enough. Makes me think of WPA, right? When government really, really got behind and understood the need of livable wages, more so than that, giving artists the opportunity to not worry about rent and food, but actually understanding that they are creating, and that is so important to us as a society. So I think it's vital, and so very, very happy that we are finding different ways to ensure, and that's going to be rolled out in the next month. So very excited about that.
That's great.
But yeah, municipalities have to, the same way municipalities make sure we get clean drinking water, they have to supply that kind of service directly to the citizens. So.
And what about the public art collection? I mean, it seems that there's so many great artists, great Chicago artists that are part of the landscape of our city. And I know that you've been involved with the airport exhibitions and things like that. How do you see that role?
I mean, it's the people's art. It's the people's art, and it needs to be out of storage, unlike museums, right, that show only a certain percentage. It's nice if we could rotate stuff out and have it present for people to engage with it. But, we Commissions are very important, and commissions from people that live here, artists that live here in Chicago are very
And what's
important.
the financial model on commissions? How do those, are they publicly and privately funded, or?
Well, as you know, with the city, anything with government, paperwork is crazy.
Right.
So a lot of times, an artist who's creating doesn't have time to fill out the 500 pages. So it can be very taxing. So that's why one thing that we have rolled out is Experience DCase, where people are going directly to artists and communities to have them fill out the paper live with them. But commissions can be appropriated. We can allocate funds there. But it's important to also bring in private funders who understand that they are part of supporting the city. It goes beyond just foundations. It goes beyond just federal government money. If a supporter wants to donate some funds, they should be able to, and it shouldn't be as difficult. Checks and balances are, of course, but not as difficult as it has been, I think, historically. So.
And how does your department engage with the museums and other art spaces in the city?
Yeah, no, definitely providing resources, and not just financial, but labor, expertise, and other resources. I think that's very important, and making sure that we're all having a conversation on what's really needed. That changes from year to year. That might change quarter to quarter, and so making sure that there's a constant dialogue, and bringing in people that aren't traditionally at the table is so important. And I think sometimes it can't be the same people at the table because we are missing something if we don't do that. And I think calling on banks like Northern Trust to also support, because if we're supporting in this area, that makes a very healthy and robust just city and society and people. And there's a good impact on that when arts and culture is heavily funded. This does better. It affects all parts of our lived experiences: crime,
Yes.
health, mental health, and so making sure that we're being very, very intentional in that area. And I want to give a shout out to Deputy Mayor Kenya Merritt's here, who is a big advocate for arts and culture, and is working very, very hard to ensure that that's not ever in danger. So we're excited about that. What are your thoughts, though, about how everyday citizens can participate? Because everyone doesn't have a large budget, right?
Sure,
and
of
everyone's
course.
not in different leadership roles, but what does that look like?
Well, I always tell people to start where you are. It can be as simple as getting engaged with an art class or an art center in your community. It can be start just looking at things. I mean, one of the things that I didn't do enough of probably was just spending time looking at art. We have all these great collections in the city and institutions in the city as well. And even though some of them seem intimidating to young kids and to some people, they're actually relatively accessible. Some of them have days and evenings when they're free. So there are many ways to get that exposure if you have a little bit of interest and enthusiasm. And there are different levels of support. You can be a member of a museum. You can be in a smaller community institution. You could be on the board because it could be accessible. Obviously, when you start to get to the large museums, there are many levels that you can participate in, and some of them can be financially demanding. But there's lots of ways to be involved in institutions, and you can also decide on a culturally specific museum if that's your area of interest. You can decide on a neighborhood museum if that's of interest to you. We have so many great historic institutions in this city that there's no shortage of places to consider.
That's right. That's right. One last question. What are you going to do with your collection after? Have you decided? Have you planned?
That's a great question. Last year, Anita Blanchard was here, and I asked her that question. And I told her not to come this year and to ask me that question, but you asked it instead. So I don't have a really, here's what I think will happen. I think there are going to be a few pieces that are institutionally worthy, and I would like to give them to institutions of choice.
Okay. The city does also accept donations.
I'll keep that.
Okay.
I'll keep that in mind.
Okay, okay.
And you've seen everything, so you know. There may be some things that family members will want, and there's always, and there's some very famous stories of collections that I don't think ours is one of them, that the value of the collection was so much that it created tax issues that overwhelmed the ability to hand it to the kids or to family members. So it'll probably be some combination of giving it to family members, institutions. I don't see it. It's not a collection that was formed with the mindset, because that's when I didn't have an advisor. Remember, I told you that. That was formed with like, oh, I'm going to have a business plan style way of accumulating the collection, and so I'm going to make sure that I've got something from each category from this period by this medium, or this artist I'm going to go really deep, and I'm going to make sure I have everything from all of his work or her work. It's not accumulated like that, so I don't think it doesn't resonate in that way. But I do think that there are work that are worth handing on to others.
Yeah. Is Tony Carmen up here? You left out? Can you grab him? Try? Okay. We just want to make an announcement for Tony. So.
Oh.
But so you don't know? You don't have a full plan?
No, it's
Okay.
in progress.
But you're willing to allow, since we talked about public art, Midway has a beautiful new installation that needs to go up. So
I'll remember that.
Okay. Okay.
I'll remember that.
Okay. Okay. I just want to take a moment because Patrick McCoy is here, and he is such an amazing collector, and just want to honor you while you're in here. And I know you have your own understanding of collecting in practice. And so just share just a bit. I know I'm putting you on the spot, just a moment, about
Well, and
what
Patrick, aren't you going to be talking tomorrow as well?
Talk about photographs.
Okay.
But, question,
You're on the spot.
you're on the spot.
And I will say something as a preview. Patrick is one of the most inspiring collectors I've ever met. He is legendary.
Yeah.
His collection tour is part of the curriculum at the School of the Art Institute. And the idea of that and his collection shows that you don't have to be a millionaire to build work. You just have to. You can just if you're enthusiastic, committed, and care about the artist, you can build a fantastic collection. And he represents the best of Chicago in that.
Yeah.
One little thing.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about what you plan to do with the collection.
Yes.
And my plan is to give it back to the public, to make sure that it stays in the public domain. So through a creation of a trust, and then hand it over to the organization so that they can build some sort of an institution around it, so it stays in Chicago.
That's great.
Announcement for you. So come up here. Yeah. I know you have to go soon, but I did want to bring Tony up
Tony,
here.
please.
And I think Rena, is she in here? Come up here, Rena, please. Yeah. All the work that you have done, Tony, and I'm bringing you to come up here because you can speak on behalf of University Club. But we brought the cultural award back and wanted to announce that you will be the 2026 recipient of the Cultural Award of Chicago.
What a lovely surprise.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. so say a few words about that. That's a big deal.
As I'm passing through, I'm not mic'd up. Well, now that's a surprise. I'm passing through. Oh, thank you so much. Passing through just to make sure that this another great panel is taking place. I mean, I think as everyone knows, we prided ourselves, the full team, on programming, as well as programming our panels, as well as supporting our exhibitors and all that you're experiencing. So I didn't know what I was walking into. I surely didn't know this. So what a deep honor on behalf of, my gosh, Expo Chicago. I guess I've been around Chicago for many years. I have deep respect for the University Club. We've built this relationship more concretely over the last 5 years. Where the club has been an incredible host and partner with our Directors Summit, as well as our talks and our discussions. So I have gotten to know the club, the membership, and the leadership over the years, and have gotten to learn their commitment to the arts and cultural community in Chicago, and learned, although I've been in Chicago for 45 years, I learned a lot more with the new leadership of the University Club, how much they've done to lean in support of our great community and city. So I guess I stand here humbled and deeply proud to receive this when I do. So what
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And
we've known each other since I was an undergrad when I walked down the...
that's true. I mean,
So, yeah.
and I'm also deeply proud to be now on the Cultural Advisory Council for Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events. So there's a lot of connections here. I think we all stand, excuse me, you're right behind me, my back here, but we all stand in service of our great city, in service of the artists and the cultural institutions of our great city. So, I guess all I can say is I can't wait to mumble through a few thanks whenever I receive. But
right.
thank you,
Thank you.
Commissioner. It
Thank
means
you.
a lot. And
Thank you.
Eric,
Yeah,
thank you for all that you do for our
yeah,
city
and I
as
think
well.
he wants to get a picture.
Oh.